Jamal Carter, a 16-year-old black kid, leans against a Chicago store, earbuds blasting, waiting for his mom. Two cops pin him to the wall, accusing him of loitering. Cold cuffs snap tight. A black SUV screeches up. A woman in a blazer flashes a CIA badge, yelling, "That's my son." The officers smirk, unmoved. She vows retribution. Jamal's eyes lock on her, fear carving his future. Why will this moment haunt him forever? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's episode is unmissable. Jamal Carter's wrists ached as the cold steel cuffs bit into his skin, the squad car's stale air choking his breath. The two officers, their badges glinting under Chicago's streetlights, had shoved him into the back seat with a force that made his head spin. He was just a 16-year-old kid, an honor student with dreams of coding apps waiting for his mom outside a corner store. Now his earbuds dangled uselessly, the music silenced by the officer's accusations of loitering. Through the smudged window, he saw the black SUV trailing close, its headlights cutting through the dusk. His mother, Alicia Carter, was behind the wheel, her face a mask of fury and fear. She'd flashed her CIA badge, her voice sharp enough to slice through the officer's arrogance, but they hadn't flinched. "Your son's in trouble," one had sneered, slamming the car door. Jamal's heart pounded, his mind racing with questions. Why him? Why now? The store's neon sign faded as the car sped toward the precinct, each mile stretching the gap between him and safety. Sergeant Roy Kessler, the older officer with a buzz cut and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, drove with deliberate slowness, glancing back at Jamal through the rearview mirror. "You think your mom's fancy badge scares us," he said, his voice low and mocking. "This is our city, kid." His partner, Officer Daniels, chuckled, scribbling something on a clipboard. Jamal's stomach twisted. He wanted to shout that he'd done nothing wrong, that he was just waiting for his mom. But the words stuck in his throat, drowned by the certainty that they wouldn't listen. Alicia's SUV stayed in sight, weaving through traffic, her determination a lifeline Jamal clung to. He pictured her storming the precinct, her CIA credentials forcing these cops to back down. She was unstoppable, wasn't she? A woman who'd faced down threats in war zones wouldn't let two local cops ruin her son's life. The precinct loomed ahead, a squat brick building with flickering lights that cast long shadows. Kessler parked, yanking Jamal out with a grip that bruised his arm. "Move," he barked, pushing him through the entrance. The lobby smelled of coffee and sweat, officers glancing up with disinterest as Jamal stumbled forward. Alicia burst through the doors moments later, her blazer wrinkled but her posture unyielding. "Release my son now," she demanded, her badge held high like a weapon. The desk sergeant, a wiry man with a bored expression, barely looked up. "Take it up with Kessler," he muttered, pointing to a hallway. Jamal was hustled into a holding area, the cuffs still tight, his shoulders aching. He caught Alicia's eye through a glass partition, her lips moving as she argued with Kessler. "He's a minor," she said, her voice carrying through the door. "You have no grounds to hold him." Kessler leaned against a desk, arms crossed, his smirk widening. "Loitering's just the start, lady. Your boy resisted arrest. That's a felony." Jamal's blood ran cold. Resisted? He hadn't resisted. He'd barely spoken, too stunned to do anything but comply. Alicia's face hardened, her hand gripping her phone. "I'm calling my supervisor. You'll regret this." Kessler shrugged, unfazed. "Call whoever you want. This is my precinct." Jamal was led to a cell, the metal door clanging shut behind him. The space was barely 6 feet wide, with a stained cot and a toilet that reeked. Graffiti scarred the walls, names and curses etched by others who'd been here. He sank onto the cot, his mind replaying the moment Kessler's lie took root. Resisted. Arrest. The words were a trap, a noose tightening around his future. He thought of his coding projects, the scholarship he'd applied for, the life he'd planned. Could one lie erase all that? Outside, Alicia was a whirlwind, dialing numbers, her voice sharp as she spoke to CIA contacts. "Get me Director Hayes," she snapped into her phone, pacing the precinct's lobby. She believed her rank, her connections would fix this, She'd seen worse in covert ops, hadn't she? But the precinct's walls seemed to absorb her authority, each call met with delays or vague promises. "We'll look into it," a voice on the line said, and she wanted to scream. Her son was in a cell, and they wanted her to wait. Jamal, alone, pressed his back against the cell's cold wall, the cuffs finally off, but the weight of them lingering. Footsteps echoed down the hall, and he tensed, expecting Alicia. Instead, Kessler appeared, flanked by Daniels. "Comfortable, kid," Kessler said, his tone dripping with mockery. Daniels leaned closer, his breath sour. "Heard you're a smart one. On a roll, huh? Doesn't matter. You're one of them now." Jamal's fists clenched, but he stayed silent, knowing any response would fuel their game. The officers lingered, their laughter bouncing off the walls. "Gotta teach these types a lesson," Kessler muttered, just loud enough for Jamal to hear. "Keeps the streets clean." They walked away, their boots fading, leaving Jamal with a rage he could barely contain. "Teach these types." The words burned, a reminder of every sidelong glance, every assumption he'd faced as a black kid, in a city that seemed to watch him too closely. He thought of his mom, her badge, her promise to fight. She'd get him out. She had to. But as minutes stretched into hours, doubt crept in. What if her power wasn't enough? Alicia, meanwhile, was stonewalled. Her calls to the CIA's legal team hit dead ends, her supervisor citing jurisdictional issues. She stood in the precinct's lobby, her phone hot against her ear, watching. Officers passed with smirks that mirrored Kessler's. She caught fragments of their whispers. Troublemaker, and CIA or not, she's out of her league. Her badge, her weapon in a world of covert deals, felt like a paper shield here. She approached the desk sergeant again, her voice steady but edged with desperation. "I want to see my son." The man sighed, flipping through papers. "He's being processed. You'll have to wait." Processed. The word hit like a punch. She knew what it meant in places like this. Paperwork twisted to fit a narrative, lies cemented into records. She thought of Jamal's face, his wide eyes as the cuffs snapped on. He was no criminal, but they were writing his story for him. Back in the cell, Jamal's ears caught a new sound, voices from the next cell over. "Another one?" A gruff voice said. "Yeah, Kessler's got a thing for the young ones," another replied, chuckling. "Makes the quotas look good." Quotas. The word sank into Jamal's gut, heavy as the cuffs had been. He wasn't a person to them, just a number, a target. He pressed his hands to his face, trying to block out the voices, but they burrowed deeper. His mom's SUV, her badge, her shout, "That's my son." It had felt like salvation, but now it was a distant echo. Kessler's lie about resisting arrest was no mistake, he realized. It was a plan, a move in a game he didn't understand. The cell door rattled, and a guard tossed in a tray of grey food. "Eat up, kid," he said, his tone flat. Jamal stared. At the tray, his appetite gone. He thought of his mum's cooking, her laughter, the way she'd quiz him on code while they ate. That life felt a million miles away. He stood, pacing the tiny cell, his sneakers scuffing the concrete. He had to stay sharp, had to believe Alicia would break through. But Kessler's smirk, his casual cruelty, lingered in his mind. The sergeant wasn't just a cop, he was a wall, a force that bent the world to his will, and Jamal was caught in its shadow. Alicia outside hung up her phone, her last call to a contact in D.C., ending with a promise to escalate. She leaned against the precinct's wall, her blazer sticking to her skin in the humid night. She'd faced enemies before, men with guns and agendas, but this was different. This was her son, her heart, trapped in a system that didn't see him as human. She straightened, her resolve hardening. She'd tear this precinct apart if she had to, but as she stepped back inside, Kessler's voice drifted from a hallway, calm and smug. "Let's see how long she lasts," he said to Daniels. Alicia's blood boiled, but she kept walking, her eyes on the fight ahead. Jamal in his cell clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "I'm not done." He didn't know how, but he'd fight too. The climax hit as Kessler's fabricated charge of resisting arrest locked Jamal in, a lie that turned a moment's injustice into a battle for his future. Alicia Carter's heels clicked against the precinct's linoleum floor, each step a pulse of determination, as she clutched her phone, her lifeline to power. She'd spent the night pulling every string she had, calling in favors from CIA brass. In Langley, her voice steady but her heart racing for her son Jamal, locked in a cell for a crime that didn't exist. The Chicago precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on her face, as she waited for her federal attorney Clara Nguyen to arrive. Jamal, just 16, was no criminal, but Sergeant Roy Kessler had painted him as 1. His lie about resisting arrest of venom spreading through the system. Alicia had believed her CIA badge would cut through this mess like a blade, her years facing global threats giving her an edge over small-time cops. But the precinct's walls seemed to mock her, each officer's glance a reminder that her authority meant nothing here. Clara burst through the doors, her briefcase swinging, her sharp suit a contrast to the precinct's grime. "I've got Director Hayes on speed dial," Clara said, her voice low but firm. "They'll release Jamal by noon." Alicia exhaled, a flicker of hope igniting. She pictured Jamal's smile, his dreams of coding, his future she'd sworn to protect. Could this be the moment they turned the tide? The precinct's holding area was a maze of metal doors and echoing shouts, but Alicia's focus was razor-sharp as she and Clara confronted Kessler. The sergeant leaned against a counter, his buzz cut glinting under the lights, his smirk unshaken. "You're wasting your time," he said, flipping through a file. "Your boy's not going anywhere." Alicia's fists clenched, but Clara stepped forward, her tone icy. "You've got no evidence. Release him or face federal charges." Kessler's eyes narrowed, but he gestured to a room down the hall. "Fine. Let's settle this." Alicia's heart lifted. Was this her breakthrough? She followed, Clara at her side, believing her son's freedom was close. The room was stark, a one-way mirror dominating one wall, a table with a flickering bulb overhead. Jamal was brought in, his wrists still red from the cuffs, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance. Alicia wanted to run to him, to shield him, but the glass held her back. Kessler announced a lineup claiming Jamal matched a robbery suspect from a nearby store. Alicia's stomach dropped. Robbery? The charge was absurd, a fiction spun from thin air. She whispered to Clara, "They're framing him." Clara nodded, already dialing her phone to escalate the case. The lineup began. 5 young black men, shuffled into place, their faces tense. Jamal stood third, his posture straight despite the weight of the moment. A store clerk, a nervous white man with a receding hairline, peered through the glass. Alicia watched, her breath shallow, as Kessler leaned close to the clerk, his voice a murmur. "Take your time," he said, but his hand rested on the man's shoulder, a subtle pressure. The clerk pointed at Jamal. "That's him," he said, his voice shaking. Alicia's world tilted. "No!" she shouted, pounding the glass. Jamal's eyes met hers, confusion and betrayal flashing across his face. Clara grabbed Alicia's arm, her voice urgent. "We'll fight this. It's a setup." But the damage was done. Kessler's smirk widened as he scribbled notes, the lineup's outcome sealing Jamal's fate. Alicia's hope, so bright moments ago, crumbled into ash. How could a lie take root so fast? Clara stormed out, demanding a meeting with the precinct. But the captain, a grey-haired man with a politician's smile, dismissed her. "The evidence is clear," he said, gesturing to Kessler's file. "Your client's a suspect now." Alicia's blood boiled. Evidence? It was a script, a play directed by Kessler to bury her son. She thought of her CIA missions, the enemies she'd outsmarted, but this was different. This was a system rigged to win, and her badge was just a prop. Jamal was led away, his sneakers dragging, his head low. Alicia caught his gaze through the glass, mouthing, "I'm fighting for you." He nodded, but his eyes were distant, as if the precinct's lies had already started to erode him. At the Juvenile Detention Center, a sprawling complex of barbed wire and concrete, Jamal was processed with brutal efficiency. Guards stripped him of his belongings, his phone, his earbuds, his identity reduced to a number. The intake officer, a woman with a pinched face, read his charges aloud. Robbery, resisting arrest. Jamal shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't do anything. She didn't look up. Tell it to the judge. The detention center's halls were a cacophony of shouts and clanging doors, the air thick with despair. Jamal was shoved into a cell, smaller than the precincts, with a bunk that creaked under his weight. The walls were scratched with names, a testament to others trapped here. He sat, his mind replaying the lineup, the clerk's trembling finger. Why him? He'd been at the store for 10 minutes, waiting for his mom. Now he was a criminal in their eyes, his black skin enough to convict. Him. Alicia, back at the precinct, was a hurricane of action, her phone burning with calls to every contact she had. She reached a federal prosecutor, her voice steady as she laid out Kessler's lies. My son's being framed, she said. Check the store's cameras. The prosecutor promised to investigate, but his tone was cautious, bureaucratic. Alicia hung up, her hands shaking. She'd thought her power would move mountains, but Kessler's influence was a shadow she couldn't shake. She returned to the precinct, demanding to see the captain again, but he was unavailable. An officer handed her a form, her son's transfer to detention already finalized. She crumpled it, her rage a fire that burned hotter with each dead. Endicott, Kessler appeared, his presence like a taunt. You're a long way from Langley, Agent Carter, he said, his voice smooth. Maybe stick to your spy games. Alicia's eyes locked on his, her voice low. You'll pay for this. He chuckled, walking away, but his parting words lingered. I've got friends in high places. Friends. The word was a warning, a hint at a network Alicia hadn't seen. Was Kessler untouchable? At the detention center, Jamal lay on his bunk, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of bees. Footsteps approached, and a guard's face appeared. At the bars, his eyes cold. Carter, huh? He said, his tone laced with contempt. Heard your trouble. Better watch yourself. Jamal sat up, his heart racing. Trouble? He was a kid, not a threat, but the guard's sneer, the lineup's lie, Kessler's smirk, they all pointed to the same truth. His blackness was the crime. He thought of his mom, her badge, her promise. She'd fight, but could she win against a system this cruel? Alicia, driving to the detention center, gripped the wheel, her mind a storm of plans. She'd expose Kessler, free Jamal, end this nightmare. But as she parked, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off or he stays inside. Her blood ran cold. Who was protecting Kessler? The climax hit as the rigged lineup confirmed Jamal's guilt, shattering Alicia's victory and plunging them deeper into a web of lies. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're raging at this injustice. Hit that like button to stand with Jamal and subscribe to follow his fight, because you won't believe what's coming. Will Alicia uncover Kessler's allies, or is her son doomed to be another statistic? Jamal Carter's sneakers scuffed the cracked concrete floor of his cell in the juvenile detention center, the air heavy with the stench of bleach and despair. At 16, he was supposed to be debugging code for his school's app club, not staring at graffiti-scarred walls that seemed to whisper defeat. The rigged lineup from the precinct still burned in his mind, the store clerk's trembling finger branding him a robber. His mother, Alicia Carter, was out there fighting, her CIA badge a beacon he clung to, but the detention center's iron bars felt like they were closing in tighter each hour. The guards' eyes followed him, their stares sharp with contempt, their words sharper. Keep moving, Carter, one barked as he shuffled to the mess hall, his tray shaking in his hands. The room was a sea of faces, mostly black and brown, kids who looked as lost as he felt. A guard, Officer Tate, a hulking man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl, loomed nearby, his gaze fixed on Jamal. You're the CIA kid, huh? Tate said, his voice low, mocking. Think you're special? Jamal's jaw tightened, but he kept his head down, knowing silence was safer. Tate's laugh was a blade cutting through the chatter. You're nothing here. The words landed like a punch, echoing the precinct's lies, Sergeant Roy Kessler's smirk, the system that had already judged him guilty for being black. Back in his cell, Jamal sat on the thin mattress, its springs digging into his thighs. He thought of his mom, her fierce shout, "That's my son," outside the store. She'd promised to fix this, but the detention center's walls seemed to mock that hope. Footsteps echoed and Tate appeared, his shadow filling the cell's doorway. "Inspection," he snapped, tossing Jamal's few belongings, a notebook and a worn photo of him and Alicia at a coding camp. Tate lingered on the photo, his lip curling. "Fancy Mom can't help you now." He tore the photo in half, dropping it like trash. Jamal's chest burned, but he stayed still, his fists clenched under the bunk. Could he survive this place without breaking? Alicia, meanwhile, was a storm of action, her SUV parked outside a dimly lit coffee shop where she met a contact, a retired FBI agent named Marcus Reed. Her blazer was wrinkled, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, but her voice was steel. "Kessler's dirty," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "He's got a judge in his pocket, Judge Harlan. I need proof." Marcus, grey-haired and cautious, flipped through her notes, his brow furrowing. "Harlan's untouchable." "Alicia, but I'll dig." She nodded, her mind on Jamal, his wide eyes as the cuffs snapped on. She'd thought her CIA connections would crush Kessler, but his influence was a hydra, growing new heads each time she struck. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or he pays." Her blood chilled, but she deleted it, her resolve hardening. She'd expose Kessler and free her son, no matter the cost. Was she underestimating the enemy? In the detention center, Jamal's days blurred into a grind of routine and hostility. The other kids kept their distance, wary of Tate's attention on him. At night, shouts and cries echoed through the halls, a reminder of the center's cruelty. During a yard break, a kid named Dion, wiry with a faded scar on his cheek, muttered, "Tate's got it out for you. Watch your back." Jamal nodded, his eyes scanning the chain-link fence, the guards' towers. He wanted to ask Dion more, but Tate's whistle cut through the air, ordering them inside. That night, Tate dragged Jamal from his cell, claiming disobedience for looking at him wrong. "Solitary's where you belong," Tate growled, shoving him into a closet-sized room with no window, just a flickering bulb. The door slammed, the lock clicking like a gunshot. Jamal sank to the floor, the walls pressing in, his breath shallow. Solitary was a void, time stretching into eternity. He thought of his mum's voice, her strength, but the silence was louder. How long could he hold on? Alicia, back in Chicago, pored over files Marcus had sent, bank records hinting at payoffs between Kessler and Judge Harlan. Her heart raced. This was the key to freeing Jamal. She drafted a motion to dismiss his charges, citing the rigged lineup and Kessler's corruption. She believed a hearing would expose the truth, that Harlan would have to act under scrutiny. She drove to the detention center, her knuckles white on the wheel, only to be turned away. "No visitors," a guard said, his tone flat. "Court's orders." Alicia's stomach twisted. Harlan's orders? Her evidence was ready, but the system was shutting her out. She called Clara, her attorney, who promised to push the motion through. "We've got this," Clara said, but Alicia heard the doubt in her voice. The hearing was set for the next day, and Alicia allowed herself a sliver of hope. Could this be the moment they broke free? In solitary, Jamal scratched equations into the dust on the floor, a habit from his coding days, a way to stay sane. The door rattled and Tate tossed in a tray of moldy bread. "Eat up, troublemaker," he said, but his eyes lingered, calculating. Hours later, a commotion woke Jamal, guards shouting down the hall. Tate returned, his face a mask of fake concern. "Found something in your cell, Carter," he said, holding up a plastic bag of pills. Jamal's heart stopped. "That's not mine," he shouted, but Tate's grin was triumphant. "Tell it to the warden." The pills were a setup, a lie, as bold as Kessler's, turning Jamal's detention into a deeper trap. Alicia arrived at the courthouse, her motion in hand, Clara at her side. The courtroom was packed, reporters whispering about the CIA mom versus the Chicago PD. Judge Harlan, a silver-haired man with a predator's smile, presided, his gavel a warning. Alicia presented her evidence, her voice steady as she detailed. Kessler's lies, the lineup, the payoffs. The reporters leaned forward, pens flying. Harlan listened, his face unreadable, then called for a recess. Alicia's pulse raced. She'd done it, hadn't she? But when court resumed, Harlan dismissed her motion, citing insufficient evidence. The reporters gasped. Clara's face fell, and Alicia's world spun. "Your son's smuggling charge stands," Harlan said, his voice cold. "Smuggling?" Alicia's knees buckled. Jamal hadn't smuggled anything. She caught Kessler in the hallway, his smirk a blade. "Told you, agent. My city." The detention center's warden, a Kessler ally, updated Jamal's file. The smuggling charge extending his stay indefinitely. Jamal, back in solitary, heard the news from Tate, who laughed as he locked the door. "You're here for the long haul, kid." Jamal's fists pounded the wall, rage and despair colliding. His mom's fight, her badge, her love, it wasn't enough. The climax hit as Tate's contraband frame-up buried Jamal deeper, obliterating. Alicia's progress and tightening the system's grip. Alicia stood outside the courthouse, rain soaking her blazer, her evidence useless. She thought of Jamal's torn photo, his dreams, his future stolen by lies. She'd underestimated Kessler, but she wouldn't stop. Jamal, in his cell, whispered his mum's name, his voice a spark in the dark. He'd fight too, somehow. But what new horror awaited them in this rigged game? Jamal Carter's breath fogged the air in the juvenile detention center's solitary cell, the flickering bulb above casting jagged shadows on the concrete. At 16, he was a coder, a dreamer, not the smuggler Officer Tate had framed him to be. The contraband pills planted in his cell had tightened the noose around his future, each lie piling onto Sergeant Roy Kessler's original accusation of loitering. Jamal's hands traced the equations he'd scratched into the dust, a lifeline to his old life. But the detention center's cruelty was relentless. In the mess hall he met Marcus, a lanky 17-year-old with sharp eyes and a dog-eared legal book. "You gotta fight smart," Marcus whispered, sliding a pencil across the table. "Write a complaint. Tate's dirty." Jamal's pulse quickened. A complaint. Could words break these walls? He nodded, his resolve sparking. They huddled in the library, drafting a formal grievance against Tate's abuse, detailing the frame-up, the torn photo, the racial slurs. Jamal's pen shook, but Marcus's steady voice kept him focused. "We're not invisible," Marcus said. "Make them see." Jamal clung to that, his mother's fierce love echoing in his mind. Alicia Carter, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of defiance, her CIA training fueling her fight. She sat in a Chicago diner, the smell of burnt coffee thick, her laptop open to a journalist's encrypted message. Lena Brooks, a reporter with a reputation for exposing corruption, had agreed to meet. Alicia's evidence, bank records tying Kessler to Judge Harlan, was a ticking bomb. She slid the folder to Lena, her voice low. "This is bigger than my son. Kessler's running a racket." Lena's eyes widened, flipping through the documents. "This could blow the lid off Chicago PD," she said. Alicia's heart raced. Was this the key to Jamal's freedom? Lena published the expose that night, a blistering article detailing Kessler's payoffs and Harlan's complicity. Social media erupted, hashtags like Justice for Jamal trending as protests swelled outside the detention center. Alicia watched from her SUV, her phone buzzing with notifications. Crowds chanted Jamal's name, their signs a sea of hope. She believed the pressure would force Judge Harlan's hand, that her son would walk free. Could public outrage finally crack the system? At the detention center, Jamal felt the shift, guards whispering about protests, their glares sharper but their steps cautious. Marcus grinned, slapping his shoulder. "Your mom's a beast, man." Jamal allowed a smile, his complaint against Tate now filed with the warden. A hearing was scheduled, and rumors swirled that Harlan was reconsidering Jamal's case. In his cell, Jamal packed his few belongings, the torn photo of him and Alicia taped together, a symbol of hope. He imagined hugging his mum, coding again, leaving this nightmare behind. The hearing came fast, a cramped courtroom packed with reporters and activists. Alicia sat in the front row, her blazer crisp, Her eyes locked on Jamal as he entered, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to his defiant posture. Harlan, his silver hair gleaming, read the motion for release, citing public interest. Alicia's breath caught. This was it, wasn't it? The crowd murmured, cameras flashing. Harlan paused, his gavel hovering, then granted Jamal's release pending review. Alicia's heart soared, her hands gripping Clara's. Jamal's eyes met hers, a spark of relief in them. They'd won, hadn't they? But as Jamal was led back to the detention center to process out, Officer Tate watched from the shadows, his scowl a promise of retribution. In the yard, as Jamal waited for his release papers, Tate orchestrated a trap. He paid an inmate, a burly kid named Rico, to start a fight. Rico lunged at Jamal, his fist crashing into Jamal's jaw. Jamal stumbled, instincts kicking in as he dodged another blow, but guards swarmed, batons raised. Tate shouted, "Carter's attacking!" The lie was a spark, igniting chaos. Rico's knife planted by Tate flashed, slicing Jamal's arm. Blood soaked his sleeve as he fell, pain blinding him. The guards tackled him, their boots pinning him to the dirt. Was this freedom's price? Alicia, waiting outside, heard sirens, her phone buzzing with a call from Clara. "There's been an incident," Clara said, her voice shaking. Alicia ran to the center, her badge useless as guards blocked her. "He's in the hospital," one said, his tone cold. At the hospital, Jamal lay in a bed, his arm bandaged, his face bruised. Machines beeped, their rhythm a cruel mockery of hope. Alicia, barred from entering, pounded the glass door, her screams echoing. She'd thought the protests the exposé had won, but Tate's staged attack had twisted the narrative. Kessler, in his precinct office, watched news reports, his smirk intact. He'd called Harlan, pulling strings to ensure the judge acted. Harlan, pressured by Kessler's allies, revoked Jamal's release, citing the violent incident. The news hit Alicia like a tidal wave, her knees buckling outside the hospital. She'd exposed Kessler, rallied a city, but it wasn't enough. The journalist Lena called, her voice grim. "They're spinning it, saying you lied about the payoffs." Alicia's exposé backfired, the public turning on her, comments online branding her a desperate mom, a fraud. Her evidence, once a weapon, was now a liability. Was the system too strong to break? In the hospital, Jamal woke, pain radiating from his arm. A nurse whispered, "You're lucky to be alive," but her eyes were cold, her words hollow. He thought of Marcus, the complaint, the protests. They'd almost won, hadn't they? But Tate's knife, the guard's lies, had buried him deeper. He clenched his fist, his mom's taped photo in his mind. He'd fight. But how? Alicia, outside, wiped her tears, her phone buzzing with another threat. "Keep pushing. He dies." She deleted it, her resolve a fire that burned hotter. Kessler's allies were closing in, but she'd find a way. The climax hit as Tate's staged attack sent Jamal to the hospital. Harlan's revocation, crushing their victory and amplifying Kessler's vengeance. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're furious at this betrayal. Smash that like button to stand with Jamal and Alicia, and subscribe to see their next move, because the fight's far from over. Can Alicia outsmart Kessler's network, or will this hospital bed be Jamal's last stop? Jamal Carter's hospital bed creaked as he shifted, the bandages on his arm itching under the sterile lights of Chicago General's ICU. Pain throbbed from the knife wound, a brutal reminder of Officer Tate's staged attack in the detention center's yard. At 16, Jamal was supposed to be pitching app ideas at school, not fighting for breath in a hospital gown, his future stolen by lies that branded him a robber, a smuggler, a thug. The beeping monitors were a cruel metronome, counting down, to a fate he couldn't grasp. His mother, Alicia Carter, was out there, her CIA badge his only anchor, but the hospital's locked doors felt like another cell. He clutched the memory of her voice. "I'm fighting for you," but the weight of Sergeant Roy Kessler's lies pressed harder each hour. A nurse, her badge reading Karen, adjusted his IV, her movements sharp, her eyes avoiding his. "Stay." "Still," she muttered, her tone clipped. Jamal's skin prickled. Something in her glance felt wrong. Was he paranoid, or was danger closer than he thought? Alicia, barred from the hospital by security concerns, paced the parking lot, her blazer soaked from a sudden rain. Her CIA instincts screamed to act, to save her son before Kessler's next move. She'd rallied protests, exposed corruption. But Tate's attack had shattered their victory, landing Jamal here vulnerable. Her phone was a lifeline, her contacts dwindling but her resolve ironclad. She needed a way in, a way to pull Jamal out. An idea sparked, reckless but possible. Pose as a nurse, slip past security, extract him to a safe house. She'd done covert ops in worse conditions, hadn't she? She changed in her SUV, donning scrubs stolen from a laundry truck, her heart pounding as she crafted a fake ID. The hospital's back entrance was unguarded, a stroke of luck. She moved fast, her steps silent, blending into the chaos of the night shift. Could this plan save her son? Inside, Jamal's eyes darted to the door as footsteps approached, hoping for his mum, but fearing Tate's shadow. Karen returned, her hands on his IV again, her lips tight. "This'll help you sleep," she said, but her voice was off, too cold. Jamal's pulse raced. He'd seen that look before, in Kessler's smirk, Tate's sneer. He wanted to rip the IV out, but restraints held his wrists. The room spun as a wave of dizziness hit, his vision blurring. Was the IV drugged? Alicia, now in the hospital's corridors, flashed her fake ID at a distracted guard, her heart a drumbeat as she neared the ICU. She'd mapped the floor in her mind, every exit, every camera. Jamal's room was close, his safety within reach. She pictured his smile, his trust in her, and pushed forward, her scrubs a perfect disguise. But as she turned a corner, alarms blared, red lights flashing. A security team stormed past, radios crackling with her description. "Female 40s posing as staff." Alicia froze. How did they know? Kessler, in his precinct office, sipped coffee, his phone buzzing with a tip from a hospital insider. He'd anticipated Alicia's move, his network deeper than she'd guessed. He called the hospital's head of security, a former cop loyal to him. "Detain her," Kessler said, his voice smooth. "She's impersonating a nurse, national security threat." The lie was bold, twisting Alicia's CIA status into a weapon. Security swarmed Alicia, their hands rough as they cuffed her, her fake ID confiscated. "You're under arrest," one growled, dragging her to a holding room. Alicia's mind raced, her plan crumbling. She'd been so close, hadn't she? In Jamal's room, Karen's tampering took hold, the IV dripping a sedative meant to silence him permanently. His heart slowed, monitors screaming as his body slumped. A crash team rushed in, but Karen slipped away, her role done. Doctors fought to stabilize Jamal, their shouts a blur as he hovered on the edge of consciousness. He thought of his mum's taped photo, her love, but darkness pulled harder. Was this the end? Alicia, in the holding room, twisted against the cuffs, her training keeping panic at bay. She overheard a guard mention Jamal's crash, her blood turning to ice. She screamed, "My son!" But the guards ignored her, their loyalty bought by Kessler's allies. A sympathetic orderly, a young black woman named Tasha, whispered through the door, "He's alive, but they're moving him." Alicia's heart clawed at her ribs. Moving him where? She manipulated the cuffs, her CIA skills loosening them, and when a guard stepped out, she slipped free, stealing his keys. She ran, her scrubs torn, her mind on Jamal. The hospital's chaos was her cover, but time was slipping away. Jamal, revived but weak, was wheeled to an ambulance, his wrists cuffed to the gurney. Guards flanked him, their orders clear: transfer to a high-security facility upstate. The facility, Blackwood, was notorious, a place where kids disappeared, into the system's jaws. Jamal's eyes fluttered, his body heavy, the sedative's effects lingering. He whispered, "Mom," but the guards' cold stares silenced him. Where were they taking him? Alicia reached the ambulance bay, her breath ragged just as the vehicle pulled away. She sprinted, her legs burning, but it vanished into the night. Her phone was gone, her allies out of reach. She sank to her knees, rain mixing with tears, her failure a knife in her gut. She'd planned the perfect rescue, hadn't she? But Kessler's reach was a shadow she couldn't escape. At the precinct, Kessler watched the transfer on a live feed, his smirk a crescent of triumph. He'd turned Alicia's move against her, framing her as a fugitive. Karen, the nurse, was his pawn, her racist views making her an easy recruit. She'd tampered with the IV on his orders, a near-fatal strike to break Jamal's spirit. Kessler leaned back, his phone buzzing with a call from Judge Harlan. "The transfer's done," Harlan said. "Blackwood's secure." Kessler nodded, untouchable. Alicia, now a fugitive, hid in an alley, her scrubs discarded, her mind a storm of plans. She'd find Jamal, expose Kessler, burn his network to the ground. But Blackwood was a fortress, its reputation a death sentence. She thought of Jamal's coding dreams, his torn photo, his trust in her. She'd failed him tonight, but she'd rise again. Jamal, in the ambulance, felt the roads hum, his body weak but his mind sharp. He'd survived, hadn't he? He'd fight for his mom, for himself, but Blackwood's shadow loomed, its horrors unknown. The climax hit as Karen's IV tampering nearly killed Jamal, and his transfer to Blackwood buried Alicia's rescue, plunging them into deeper danger. Alicia stood in the alley, her fists clenched, her resolve a fire that burned through despair. She'd track the ambulance, break into Blackwood, save her son. Jamal, cuffed and fading, whispered equations, a coder's defiance against a system. That saw him as nothing. But what new terrors awaited in Blackwood's walls? Jamal Carter's body jolted with every bump of the ambulance, the cuffs on his wrists biting deeper as it sped toward Blackwood, a high-security facility cloaked in rumors of abuse. At 16, he was a coder, not the monster Sergeant Roy Kessler's. Lies had made him, a black kid branded a robber, smuggler, and now a hospital troublemaker after a tampered IV nearly stopped his heart. The sedative's fog lingered, his arm throbbing from the detention center's staged attack, but his mind clung to his mother, Alicia Carter, her CIA badge of fading hope. The ambulance's siren wailed, a banshee's cry as guards in the front muttered about problem kids. Jamal's eyes traced the ceiling's cracks, equations from his coding days dancing in his head, a shield against fear. Was Blackwood the end of his fight? Alicia, a fugitive in Chicago's shadows, crouched in an alley, her stolen scrubs swapped for a hoodie, her breath visible in the cold night air. Her hospital plan had collapsed, Kessler's tip-off turning her into a hunted woman. Her son was gone, whisked to a fortress she couldn't breach. Her CIA training screamed for action, her heart for Jamal's safety. She slipped into a burner phone booth, dialing a hacker contact, Zoe, a ghost in the digital world. "I need Blackwood systems," Alicia said, her voice low. "Blueprints, security, everything." Zoe's keyboard clacked through the line. "Risky, but I'm in." Alicia's pulse raced. Could she outsmart Blackwood's walls? At Blackwood, Jamal was dragged from the ambulance, his legs weak, the facility's barbed wire glinting under floodlights. Warden Holt, a gaunt man with eyes like flint, waited, his suit pristine against the concrete backdrop. "Carter," Holt said, his voice a blade, "you're a flight risk. Welcome to hell." Guards shoved Jamal through intake, stripping his hospital gown, replacing it with a grey jumpsuit. The air reeked of mold, the halls echoing with distant screams. His cell was a steel box, 4 feet wide, a cot bolted to the floor. Holt's rules were clear. No contact, no mercy. "You're nobody here," a guard sneered, slamming the door. Jamal's heart sank, his blackness a target in Holt's gaze. Was this where hope died? Alicia, in a safe house, pored over Zoe's hacked files, Blackwood's layout glowing on her laptop, cameras at every corner, guards with tasers, a lockdown, system triggered by any breach. She planned a breakout, her CIA skills mapping a path through vents and blind spots. She'd slip in, grab Jamal, vanish before dawn. Her confidence surged. She'd faced worse odds in covert ops, hadn't she? She packed a bag, tools, a silenced pistol, her eyes on the prize, her son's freedom. But as she sent Zoe the final plan, her screen flickered, a warning flashing. Intrusion detected. Her blood chilled. Had Holt's system caught her? At Blackwood, Jamal endured Holt's regime, meals of grey slop, hours in a cage-like yard where guards taunted, "Run, boy, let's see you try." His arm ached, the knife scar a reminder of Tate's betrayal. Other kids, hollow-eyed, whispered of beatings, of kids who disappeared. Jamal's spirit wavered, but his mom's taped photo, etched in his mind, kept him fighting. He scratched code into the cot's frame, a silent rebellion. Could he survive long enough for her to reach him? Holt, in his office, monitored security, feeds, his phone buzzing with a call from Kessler. "The mom's hacking us," Kessler said, his voice smug. "I tipped the feds." Holt grinned, his fingers dancing over a keyboard, planting digital evidence in Jamal's file. Encrypted messages, fake plans for a prison break. "He's a terrorist now," Holt said, finalizing the label. Federal agents, tipped by Kessler, raided Alicia's safe house, their boots shattering the door as she fled through a window, her laptop abandoned. Her breakout plan, so close to perfect, was dust. Was she too late to save Jamal? In Blackwood, Jamal faced Holt's wrath, the terrorist label justifying brutal punishments. Guards woke him nightly, dousing him with ice water, their laughs echoing. "Terrorist scum!" one spat, his fist grazing Jamal's jaw. Holt ordered enhanced isolation, chaining Jamal in a pitch-black cell, the cold seeping into his bones. Pain was constant, hunger a claw in his gut, but he whispered equations. His mom's name refusing to break. His black skin, his very existence, was Holt's excuse, a system weaponizing race against him. How much more could he take? Alicia, now underground, hid in a motel, her burner phone her only link to Zoe. "They've locked me out," Zoe said, her voice tense. "Holt's got military-grade security." Alicia's fists clenched, her failure a weight crushing her. She'd hacked embassies, toppled cartels, but Holt's fortress was a beast she couldn't slay. She thought of Jamal's coding camp, his laughter, his trust. She'd promised to protect him, hadn't she? She plotted a new move, contacting a rogue CIA operative, but Blackwood's shadow loomed larger. At Blackwood, Jamal's body ached, bruises layering over scars, Holt's torture a daily ritual. A guard, less cruel, slipped him an extra bread roll, whispering, "Your mum's out there." Jamal's heart flickered, a spark of hope. He clung to it, his mind racing with plans to endure, to fight, but Holt's office screens glowed with Jamal's fake terrorist file, shared with federal databases. Kessler's call came again, his voice a purr. "He's buried, Holt. She's next." Holt nodded, his eyes on Jamal's cell feed, a predator savoring the hunt. Alicia in the motel sketched Blackwood's vents, her new plan forming, but her burner buzzed with a photo. Jamal, chained, bloodied. "Stop, or he's dead," the message read. Her resolve wavered, tears falling, but she wiped them away, her fire reigniting. She'd break him out, expose Holt, end this nightmare. Jamal in his cell felt the chains, his body screaming, but his mind held his mum's face, her love a lifeline. The climax hit as Holt's terrorist label, and the federal raid crushed Alicia's breakout, plunging Jamal into torture and Alicia into despair. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're outraged at this cruelty. Hit that like button to rally for Jamal's survival. And subscribe to see Alicia's next strike, because this battle's heating up. Will Alicia breach Blackwood's walls, or has Kessler's web trapped them both for good? Jamal Carter's chains rattled in Blackwood's pitch-black isolation cell, the cold steel cutting into his wrists as he fought to stay conscious. At 16, he was a coder, not the terrorist Warden Holt's fabricated files claimed, his black. Skin a bullseye for a system that started with Sergeant Roy Kessler's loitering lie and spiraled into a nightmare of robbery, smuggling, and now terror charges. Bruises layered his body, Holt's torture a daily ritual, but his mother's face, Alicia Carter, her CIA badge, a distant beacon, kept his spirit alive. The ice water dousings, the starvation, the guards' racial slurs, they were meant to break him. But Jamal whispered equations, his coding dreams a defiance against despair. A memory of Marcus, the detainee from the juvenile center, sparked in his mind, his words clear. Fight smart. Could Jamal turn this hell into a battleground? In the yard, under floodlights that burned his eyes, Jamal caught whispers from other kids. their faces gaunt, their stories mirroring his. Black and brown teens trapped by lies. A kid named Eli, with a stutter and a scar across his brow, muttered, "Holt's untouchable, but we're not ghosts." Jamal's pulse quickened. Not ghosts. He shared Marcus's advice, whispering in the yard, the showers, the mess hall, organizing a secret protest. They'd refuse work shifts, chant for justice, expose Holt's abuses. The plan spread, a spark in the dark, kids nodding, their fear turning to fire. Was this their chance to be heard? Alicia, holed up in a Chicago motel, her fugitive status a noose tightening daily, worked her burner phone, coordinating with Zoe, her hacker ally. Her Blackwood breakout plan had collapsed, federal agents raiding her safe house, but she refused to quit. She posted online, amplifying Jamal's story, her CIA savvy turning hashtags into weapons. Justice for Jamal trended again, protests flaring. Outside Blackwood, news vans circling. Alicia's heart raced as she watched live streams, crowds chanting her son's name. She believed the pressure would force a federal probe, that Holt's fortress would crack. Had she finally outmaneuvered? Kessler. At Blackwood, Jamal's protest gained traction, kids passing notes, their defiance growing. In the mess hall they stood, refusing to eat, chanting, "No more lies." Guards tensed, batons twitching, but the kids held firm, Jamal's voice rising, "We're not your quotas." Holt watched from his office, his flinty eyes narrowing on security feeds. He called Kessler, his voice calm but lethal. The kids stirring trouble. Time to end it. Kessler chuckled, his plan already in motion. Stage a riot. Pin it. On him. Holt nodded, his fingers tapping a desk, a predator setting a trap. Could Jamal's rebellion survive Holt's wrath? The protest's second day shook Blackwood, kids locking arms, their chants echoing through concrete halls. Jamal stood at the front, his bruised body trembling but his voice steady, demanding a federal inspector. Guards hesitated, the crowd's size daunting, but Holt's orders were clear. He paid an inmate, a hulking teen named Vance, to spark chaos. In the yard, Vance shoved a kid, fists flying, and guards fired tear gas, claiming a riot. Jamal shouted, "Stay calm!" But panic spread, kids scattering as batons swung. Holt's voice boomed over speakers, "Carter's the ringleader!" The lie was a blade, cutting through the protest's heart. Was this the end of their stand? Alicia, watching news reports in her motel, saw Blackwood's gates swarmed by SWAT, her stomach dropping. The anchor called it a violent uprising, Jamal's name smeared as the instigator. Her phone buzzed with Zoe's warning. Feds are buying Holt's story. Alicia's expose, her protests were backfiring, the narrative twisted against her son. She slammed her fist on the table, her CIA training warring with despair. She'd rallied a nation, hadn't she? But Holt's trap was closing. She grabbed her burner, calling a rogue journalist, vowing to fight on, but the news feed showed smoke rising from Blackwood, her heart sinking. At Blackwood, SWAT stormed the yard, their boots a thunderclap, rifles raised. Jamal ran, dodging. Gas canisters, his arm bleeding anew from the hospital scar. He hid behind a dumpster, his breath ragged, kids screaming around him. A SWAT officer spotted him, his radio crackling with Holt's orders. "Take Carter down." The officer fired. The bullet grazing Jamal's shoulder, blood soaking his jumpsuit. He fell, pain blinding, his body curling as boots closed in. "Alive but barely," he whispered. "Mom," his hope flickering. Was this his final stand? Holt, in his office, watched the chaos, his screens glowing with Jamal's fall. He leaked footage to the press, edited to show Jamal throwing a rock, a lie that sealed his guilt. The federal probe Alicia had hoped for stalled, investigators citing the riot as proof of Jamal's danger. Kessler at the precinct grinned, his network untouched. "Told you, Holt, he's done." Holt updated Jamal's file, the terrorist label now paired with riot leader, extending his sentence to years. Jamal, dragged to a medical bay, his shoulder bandaged, felt the weight of Holt's victory, his protest crushed, his body broken. Alicia in her motel saw the footage, her scream tearing through the room. The rock, the riot, it was a setup, wasn't it? She called Zoe, her voice shaking. Get me Blackwood's cameras. I need the truth. Zoe hesitated, her tone grim. They've locked me out, Alicia. Holt's winning. Alicia's eyes burned, her son's bloodied face on the news, a knife in her gut. She'd rallied thousands, but Holt's lies were stronger. At Blackwood, Jamal lay in the medical bay, cuffs chaining him to the bed, a guard muttering, "You're lucky you're breathing, terrorist." The word stung, a lie that buried his coding dreams, his honor roll, his blackness twisted into a crime. He thought of Marcus, Eli, the kids who'd chanted with him. They'd fought, hadn't they? He clenched his fist, pain shooting through his shoulder, his spirit refusing to snap. Alicia, in her motel, sketched a new plan, her burner buzzing. With a tip. A guard might talk. She'd find a way, expose Holt, save Jamal. The climax hit as Holt staged riot and Jamal's shooting destroyed the protest, Kessler's lies burying Alicia's hopes in a deeper grave. Jamal, cuffed and bleeding, whispered equations, his mum's love a spark in the dark. Alicia stood, her hoodie shadowing her face, her resolve a flame that burned through defeat. She'd storm Blackwood, free her son, end this war. But what new horror awaited in Holt's fortress? Alicia Carter's fingers trembled as she gripped her burner phone in a Chicago motel, the room's peeling wallpaper, a stark contrast to her CIA-honed precision. Her son, Jamal, 16 and a coder, was bleeding in Blackwood's medical bay, his body battered by a SWAT bullet, his name smeared as a terrorist and riot leader by Warden Holt and Sergeant Roy Kessler's lies. Her protests, her exposé, had sparked hope, only to be crushed by a staged riot that buried Jamal deeper in a system that saw his blackness as a crime. The news played on a muted TV, doctored footage of Jamal throwing a rock looping endlessly, a lie that turned public sympathy to scorn. Alicia's heart clawed at her ribs, her failure a weight she could barely carry. She'd rallied a city, hadn't she? Now she was a fugitive, her CIA badge useless, her allies dwindling. Her hacker contact, Zoe, had been locked out of Blackwood's systems, but Alicia refused to break. She dialed a new number, a hacker collective known as ShadowNet, their reputation as digital outlaws her last hope. "I need Kessler's network exposed," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Every dirty cop, every bribe." The voice on the line, a woman named Raven, laughed softly. "That's a tall order, Agent, but we're game." Alicia exhaled, a spark of possibility igniting. Could ShadowNet turn the tide? At Blackwood, Jamal lay cuffed to a medical bed, his shoulder burning where the bullet had grazed, the antiseptic smell choking his breath. Guards hovered, their eyes cold, one muttering, "Terrorist trash." The word stung, piling onto Kessler's loitering charge, the rigged robbery, the planted pills, the staged riot. He was a kid, not a monster, but Holt's fortress had stripped him to a number. He thought of his mom's taped photo, her love and Marcus's words. "Fight smart." His fingers traced the bed's frame, itching for a keyboard, his coding dreams a rebellion against despair. Was there a way to fight from this bed? Alicia in the motel worked with ShadowNet, their encrypted chat buzzing with data. Raven's team dug into Kessler's finances, uncovering a web of payoffs linking him to Holt, Judge Harlan, and a new name, Victor Crane, a private prison CEO. Alicia's pulse raced as files flooded her screen, bank transfers, encrypted emails, proof of a racket that thrived on kids like Jamal. She leaked the evidence to Lena Brooks, the journalist, who posted it online within hours. The story exploded, headlines screaming Chicago PD's prison pipeline, justice for Jamal trending globally. Protests swelled outside Blackwood, the DOJ announcing a probe into Holt's facility. Alicia's heart soared, her motel room glowing with hope. Had she finally struck a fatal blow? In Blackwood, Jamal felt the shift, guards whispering about the DOJ, their taunts quieter. A nurse, a young black woman named Tasha, slipped him a note. "Your mum's shaking things up." Jamal's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. He was due for release to a general cell, his shoulder healing, freedom a distant but growing light. He clutched Tasha's note, his mom's fight fueling his own. In the yard, he whispered to Eli, the scarred kid from the protest, "We're not done." Eli nodded, their defiance a spark in Blackwood's gloom. Was freedom closer than he dared? Hope. Alicia watched live streams, crowds chanting Jamal's name, DOJ vans outside Blackwood. She believed the probe would free her son, that Kessler's empire was crumbling. She called Clara, her attorney, who confirmed a hearing was set. "We've got momentum," Clara said, her voice bright. Alicia packed her bag, ready to surface, to stand with Jamal in court. But as she scrolled her phone, a new video dropped, a bombshell that stopped her cold. The footage, leaked by Kessler, showed Alicia in her CIA days, edited to paint her as a traitor, meeting shady figures, handling cash. "CIA agent plotted against Chicago," the caption read. Alicia's blood froze, her motel room shrinking. The video was a lie, wasn't it? Social media turned, her allies silent, Lena's texts unanswered. Shadownet's chat went dark, Raven muttering, "Too hot, Carter." Alicia's evidence, her protests, her hope, they were ashes now. The DOJ. Probe stalling as public outrage shifted to her. Kessler, in his precinct office, leaned back, his smirk a crescent of triumph. He dug up old CIA footage, twisted it with a hacker's touch, and fed it to the press. "She's done," he told Holt over a secure line. "Crane's taking." "The kid," Holt nodded, finalizing Jamal's transfer to Crane's private prison, Ironwood, a facility known for breaking spirits. Jamal in Blackwood's medical bay was roused by guards, his cuffs snapping back on. "You're moving," one grunted, his tone final. Jamal's heart sank, Tasha's note crumpling in his fist. Ironwood. He'd heard whispers. Kids sent. They never returned. The ambulance ride was a blur, his shoulder aching, his mind racing. He'd been close to freedom, hadn't he? Now, a new prison loomed, its horrors unknown. Alicia, in her motel, saw the transfer news, a leaked memo on a dark web forum. Ironwood was Crane's domain, a profit machine built on inmate suffering. Her DOJ victory, her viral evidence, had been a mirage, Kessler's counterattack a masterstroke. She slammed her phone, tears falling, her fugitive status chaining her as tightly as Jamal's cuffs. She thought of his coding camp, his laughter, his trust. She'd promised to save him, hadn't she? At Ironwood, Jamal was processed, his jumpsuit swapped for a thinner one, the air thick with sweat and fear. Crane's guards, their eyes dead, shoved him into a cell, its walls stained with despair. A speaker crackled, Crane's voice booming, "Welcome to my house, Carter." Jamal's stomach twisted, Kessler's shadow stretching across miles. In the precinct, Kessler visited, his boots clicking as he faced a mirror, gloating to his reflection. "Untouchable," he whispered, his network a fortress. Alicia in her motel found a new lead, a disgruntled Ironwood guard willing to talk. She'd infiltrate Crane's empire, free Jamal, burn it all down. The climax hit as Kessler's doctored. Footage and Jamal's transfer to Ironwood obliterated Alicia's momentum, plunging them into a darker abyss. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're raging at Kessler's lies, smash that like button to stand with Alicia's fight, and subscribe to see Jamal's next stand, because this war's far from over. Can Alicia infiltrate Ironwood's walls, or will Crane's prison be Jamal's final cage? Jamal Carter's bare feet scraped the rusted floor of his Ironwood cell, the private prison's air thick with the stench of despair and cheap disinfectant. At 16, he was a coder, not the terrorist, robber, or rioter that Sergeant Roy Kessler's lies amplified by Warden Holt and now Victor Crane had branded him. The thin jumpsuit clung to his bruised skin, his shoulder still aching from Blackwood's SWAT bullet, his body weak from the hospital's tampered IV. Ironwood was a machine, its grey walls and barred windows designed to grind kids like him into dust, his blackness a currency for Crane's profit. Guards patrolled with tasers, their boots a constant drumbeat, their racial slurs a background hum. "Keep moving, Carter," one snapped, shoving him toward a work line where inmates sorted scrap metal for pennies. Jamal's hands bled, the metal biting, but he kept his eyes down, his mum's taped photo a mental lifeline. Alicia Carter, a fugitive, was out there, her CIA badge a ghost of hope. Could he hold on until she reached him? In a Chicago warehouse, Alicia hid, her hoodie shadowing her face, her burner phone buzzing with a tip from a disgruntled Ironwood guard. Her DOJ probe, her viral exposé, had been crushed by Kessler's doctored footage, painting her as a traitor. ShadowNet had abandoned her. The public turned, but she was a predator now stalking Crane's empire. The guard, a man named Malik, had sent blueprints. Ironwood's lay out a maze of cameras and electrified fences. Alicia posed as a corporate auditor, her forged credentials perfect, her plan to infiltrate Crane's headquarters and access inmate. Records. She'd find Jamal's file, expose Crane's racket, free her son. Her heart raced as she slipped into a tailored suit, her CIA training a blade sharpened by desperation. Was this her chance to strike back? At Ironwood, Jamal faced Crane, a sleek man in a pinstripe suit, his smile a shark's, his office a fortress of glass and steel. Crane visited the work line, his eyes locking on Jamal. "Defiant, aren't you?" he said, his voice smooth. "I profit from boys like you." Jamal's jaw clenched, his black skin Crane's excuse, his defiance a challenge. Crane leaned, closer, whispering, "Break or I'll break you." Jamal's blood boiled, but he stayed silent, his coding equations a mental shield. Back in his cell, he scratched plans into the wall, a way to resist, to survive. Could he outsmart Crane's?
Game?
Alicia's infiltration began, her auditor disguise slipping her past Ironwood's corporate gates. She navigated cubicles, her fake ID scanning at every checkpoint, her eyes on the server room. Crane's company, Apex Corrections, ran prisons. Like factories, Jamal's suffering a line item in their profits. She hacked a terminal, pulling Jamal's file, her breath catching at the lies. Terrorist, rioter, escape risk. She uploaded the truth to a dark web forum, believing exposure would force Crane's hand. Her fingers flew, her confidence surging. She'd done it, hadn't she? But Crane's security system, military grade, pinged her breach, alarms blaring. Alicia froze, her plan unraveling. Had she miscalculated? Crane, in his office, watched. The alert, his smile cold. He'd anticipated trouble. Kessler's warning about Alicia, a blueprint for his trap. He called Kessler, his voice calm. "She's in my system. Time for a lesson." Kessler at the precinct grinned, feeding Crane a plan. Stage an escape attempt, pin it on Jamal. Crane orchestrated it, bribing a guard to unlock a gate, planting a shank in Jamal's cell. In the yard, guards shouted, "Escape!" as sirens wailed, their guns trained on Jamal. He stood, hands raised, confusion gripping him. "I didn't do anything," he yelled, but a guard tackled him, the shank found in his pocket. The lie was a noose tightening Crane's grip. Was this his end? Alicia, cornered in the server room, fought two guards, her CIA skills dropping them, but more swarmed, their tasers crackling. She ran, her suit torn, her upload incomplete. Crane's voice boomed over intercoms. "Intruder apprehended." She hid in a vent, her breath shallow, but drones scanned the ducts, their red eyes finding her. Guards dragged her out, cuffs snapping. On, her infiltration exposed. Federal agents, tipped by Crane, arrested her, charging her with cyber-terrorism. Her heart sank. Jamal's file still locked in Crane's servers. She'd been so close, hadn't she? At Ironwood, Jamal faced Crane's punishment, a disciplinary cell with no light, no cot, just a bucket and chains. Guards beat him, their fists targeting his black skin, their slurs a chorus. "Escape artist, huh?" one growled, his boot cracking Jamal's rib. Blood pooled in his mouth, pain a white-hot scream, but he whispered his mum's name, her lover's spark. Crane watched on a monitor, his profits soaring with each strike. "He's a lesson," Crane told Kessler, his voice a purr. "No one defies me." Jamal's body curled, his equations fading, but his spirit clung to defiance. How much more could he endure? Alicia, in federal custody, sat in a sterile cell, her wrists raw, her mind racing. She'd hacked cartels, dodged assassins, but Crane's trap was a masterpiece, Kessler's shadow everywhere. Her burner was gone, her allies silent, but she overheard a guard mention Jamal's escape attempt. Her blood chilled, the lie a mirror of Kessler's playbook. She manipulated a pencil from a clipboard, picking her cell's lock, her CIA training a flicker of hope. But as she planned her next move, a TV in the hall played news. CIA traitor's son leads prison break. Her knees buckled, the lie burying her deeper. Was Jamal still alive? In Ironwood, Jamal's torture continued, guards waking him with shocks, their laughter echoing. A sympathetic inmate, a kid named Ty, slipped him water, whispering, "Your mom's a legend." Jamal's eyes burned, his mom's fight a lifeline. He scratched a new equation, a plan to endure, to expose Crane. But Crane's guards doubled. Down, his file updated, mastermind of escape. The transfer to a worse cell loomed. Ironwood's depths a tomb. Alicia in her cell found a loose panel, her escape forming, but a guard's radio crackled. "Carter's kid's done." Her heart stopped, her resolve afire against despair. She'd free him, burn Crane's empire, end this nightmare. The climax hit as Crane staged escape, and Alicia's arrest crushed their hopes. Jamal's torture a testament to systemic cruelty. Jamal, chained and bleeding, whispered code, his mom's love a spark in the dark. Alicia, prying the panel, vowed to reach Ironwood, save her son, destroy Kessler's web. But what horrors awaited in Ironwood's depths? Jamal Carter's body screamed in Ironwood's disciplinary cell, the chains on his wrists and ankles cutting into his bruised skin. The darkness a suffocating shroud. At 16 he was a coder, not the terrorist, rioter, or escape artist Victor. Crane's lies had branded him, building on Sergeant Roy Kessler's original loitering accusation that spiraled into a labyrinth of systemic racism. Blood crusted his lips, his ribs cracked from guards' boots, his blackness a currency for Crane's profit-driven prison. The torture was relentless, electric shocks waking him, slurs like knives. "You're nothing, boy." His shoulder, grazed by Blackwood's bullet, throbbed, his strength fading. But his mother's face, Alicia Carter, her CIA badge a flicker of hope, kept him alive. He whispered equations, his coding dreams a rebellion against despair, Marcus's words echoing. Fight smart. Could he spark one last stand? In the work line, sorting scrap under Ironwood's buzzing lights, Jamal caught eyes with Ty, the inmate who'd slipped him water. Ty's nod was subtle, a signal of trust. Jamal whispered, "We can fight back." Ty's eyes widened, but he listened as Jamal outlined a plan, an uprising, inmates refusing work, exposing Crane's abuses to the world. They spread the word, whispers in cells, notes passed in the mess hall, kids like them, black and brown, their spirits battered but not broken. The plan grew, a fire in Ironwood's gloom, inmates ready to stand. Was this their moment to break? Crane's machine. Alicia in her federal cell, her wrists raw from cuffs, worked a stolen pencil into the lock, her CIA training a lifeline. The TV's lies, calling Jamal an escape mastermind, fueled her rage, Kessler's shadow everywhere. She'd heard a guard mention Crane's empire, his profits tied to kids like Jamal. Her escape was close, a loose panel in her cell, her path to freedom. She needed leverage, proof to bury Crane. Posing as a janitor, she slipped into a guard's office, her movements silent, and found a ledger, Crane's financials, bribes to senators, payoffs to Kessler. Her heart raced as she photographed it, her phone hidden in her sleeve. This was the key, wasn't it? She sent the files to Lena Brooks, the journalist, believing exposure would force Crane's downfall. In Ironwood, Jamal's uprising ignited. Inmates locking arms in the yard, refusing to work, their chant rising, "No more cages!" Jamal stood at the front, his voice hoarse but strong. "We're not your prophet." Guards hesitated, their tasers twitching, the crowd's size a threat. Crane watched from his glass office, his shark smile fading, his phone buzzing with Kessler's voice. "Crush it, Victor." Alicia's leaked ledger hit the news, Lena's article detailing Crane's bribes, his prison empire a scandal. Social media erupted, protests swarming Ironwood's gates, Crane's stock plummeting. Alicia, back in her cell, saw the news on a guard's phone, her heart soaring. The uprising, the leaks, they were working, weren't they? In Ironwood, Jamal felt the shift, guards retreating, a federal inspector rumored to be en route. Ty slapped, his shoulder, Your mom's a warrior, man. Jamal's eyes burned, his mom's fight a beacon. He believed they'd won, that Crane's empire was cracking. The yard vibrated with hope, inmates chanting louder, their defiance a tidal wave. Alicia, manipulating a sympathetic guard, slipped a note to Lena, urging more coverage. The DOJ probe restarted, Crane's bribes under scrutiny. She pictured Jamal free, coding again, their nightmare over. Had they finally turned the tide? But Crane in his office didn't flinch, his wealth a fortress. He called Kessler, his voice ice. They want a fight? I'll give them one. He bribed a DOJ official, planting evidence, fake emails tying Jamal's uprising to a terrorist cell. The news shifted, headlines screaming, Ironwood riot a terror plot. Jamal's name, a lightning rod. Crane's allies spun the ledger as forged, Alicia's leaks discredited. Protests faltered, the public turning, DOJ vans pulling back. Alicia's cell TV played the lies, her knees buckling. Her victory, so close, was a mirage, wasn't it? In Ironwood, guards stormed the yard, their batons swinging, gas canisters bursting. Jamal shouted, "Hold the line!" But chaos swallowed his voice, inmates scattering. A guard targeted him, his taser hitting Jamal's chest, the shock dropping. Him. Crane's voice boomed. Carter's the terrorist. The lie was a sledgehammer, crushing the uprising. Jamal was dragged to a new cell, solitary for life, a concrete tomb with no light, no hope. His sentence was updated, his blackness a life sentence. Was this the system's final blow? Alicia, in her cell, saw the news, her scream tearing through. The silence. The terrorist label, the DOJ's retreat. It was Kessler's playbook, Crane's execution. She'd leaked the ledger, rallied the world, but Crane's bribes were a wall she couldn't breach. A guard taunted, "Your kid's done, traitor." The word stung, her CIA past twisted against her. She faced treason charges, her escape plan stalled, her pencil snapped by a patrol. She thought of Jamal's coding camp, his laughter, his trust. She'd promised to save him, hadn't she? In Ironwood, Jamal curled in solitary, his ribs screaming, his body a map of pain. The uprising had been his heart, his fight for Ty, for all of them. Now it was ash, Crane's lies burying him. A guard's boot kicked his side, terrorist scum, the slur a daily ritual. But Jamal whispered his mom's name, his equations, refusing to break. He scratched a message into the wall, a plea for someone, anyone, to find. Could his fight still matter? Alicia, in her cell, found a new spark, a guard's dropped key, her escape reforming. She'd reach Ironwood, free Jamal, burn Crane's lies, but the TV played on. A senator praising Crane's security measures, Kessler's network untouchable. Jamal, in solitary, felt the walls close, his breath shallow, his mum's love a fading light. The climax hit as Crane's terrorist. Label and Alicia's treason charges shattered their victory, locking Jamal in solitary and Alicia in a cell. Alicia gripped the key, her resolve afire against despair, vowing to infiltrate Ironwood, save her son. Jamal, chained, scratched his message, his spirit a spark in the dark. But what new trap awaited in Crane's empire? Jamal Carter's breath rasped in Ironwood's solitary cell, the concrete walls a vice around his battered body, his cracked ribs screaming with each shallow inhale. At 16, he was a coder, not the terrorist Victor Crane's lies had branded. Him, a black kid buried under Sergeant Roy Kessler's loitering charge, a rigged robbery, planted pills, a staged riot, and now a life sentence for a fabricated uprising. The darkness was total, the air stale, guards' boots a distant thunder, their slurs a constant. Die slow, scum. His shoulder, scarred from Blackwood's bullet, ached, his skin bruised from Crane's torture, but his mother, Alicia Carter, her CIA badge a fading star, kept his spirit alive. He scratched a message into the wall. Jamal was here, a coder's plea for the world to remember. A sympathetic guard, a wiry man named Leon, slipped him a pencil stub, whispering, "Your mum's out there, kid." Jamal's heart flickered, his mum's fight a spark. Could he smuggle a message to fuel her war? In a federal cell, Alicia clutched a stolen key, her wrists raw, her CIA training a blade against despair. Crane's terrorist label had crushed her uprising, her treason charges a noose, but Jamal's face, his coding dreams, drove her. She'd escaped once, slipping through a loose panel, only to be recaptured, but this key was her second chance. She waited for the night shift, her breath steady, her plan clear. Pose as a guard, reach a courthouse, expose Crane's bribes. She'd leaked his ledger, sparked protests, but Crane's senator allies had buried her truth. A TV in the hall played lies. Carter's terror plot foiled, her name poison. She'd free Jamal, burn Crane's empire. Hadn't she sworn it? In Ironwood, Jamal's pencil scratched a note, detailing Crane's abuses, the torture, the profit off black bodies. He passed it to Leon, his voice a whisper. "Get this out." Leon nodded, slipping the note into his boot, a risk that could cost his job. The note reached a journalist, Lena Brooks, via a chain of inmates' families, its words igniting a new exposé. Lena's article hit Ironwood's torture factory, Jamal's story trending again, protests swelling. Alicia, in her cell, picked the lock, her key turning, her heart racing. She slipped into a guard's uniform, her movements silent, and reached the courthouse, her stolen evidence ready. Was this her final stand? The courtroom was packed, reporters buzzing, as Alicia, disguised, took the stand, her voice steady. "Broadcasting Crane's bribes live on a hacked feed. My son's no terrorist," she declared, holding up the ledger, its numbers damning. Social media exploded. Justice for Jamal trending globally, the DOJ forced to act. Crane's stock crashed. His senators scrambling, a retrial ordered. Alicia's heart soared, her disguise holding, her escape a triumph. She pictured Jamal free, coding, their nightmare ending. Had she broken Crane's machine? In Ironwood, Jamal heard whispers, guards muttering about protests, a retrial. Leon slipped him a nod. "You're out soon, kid." Jamal's eyes burned. His mum's fight a beacon. He was processed for release, his cuffs off, his jumpsuit swapped for clothes. He stepped into the yard, sunlight blinding, freedom so close. But Crane, in his office, his empire cracking, didn't yield. He called Kessler, his voice ice. "He doesn't walk free." Kessler, untouchable, hired mercenaries, ex-military with no loyalty, but cash. Crane's plan: kidnap Jamal, stage it as a gang hit, bury the evidence. The retrial was a distraction, his power a fortress. Was Jamal's freedom a lie? Alicia, leaving the courthouse, her disguise shed, got a tip from Zoe, her hacker ally. Crane's hired killers. Her blood chilled, her victory a trap. She tracked Jamal's release, her SUV racing to Ironwood, her CIA skills a predator's edge. At the prison gates, Jamal stepped out, his legs shaky, the air sweet. He scanned for his mom, his heart pounding, but a black van screeched up, mercenaries in masks leaping out, their guns drawn. Jamal ran, his ribs screaming, but a taser hit, dropping him. The mercenaries dragged him into the van, tires squealing as it sped off. Alicia arrived, her SUV skidding, her eyes catching the van's taillights. She floored it, her phone buzzing with Zoe's hack. The van's route, a warehouse on Chicago's outskirts. Was she fast enough to save him? The warehouse was a rusted shell, its shadows thick, mercenaries circling Jamal, his wrists zip-tied, blood dripping from a fresh cut. Their leader, a scarred man named Vance, smirked. "Crane says you're a problem." Jamal's eyes darted, his coder's mind searching for a way out, his mom's love afire. Alicia crashed through a side door, her pistol drawn, her voice a roar, "Let him go!" The mercenaries turned, guns raised, a standoff freezing the air. Vance laughed, his finger on the trigger. "You're too late, agent." Alicia's eyes locked on Jamal's, her heart a drumbeat, her plan a gamble. She'd outsmarted cartels, hadn't she? But Crane's mercenaries were a wall, Kessler's shadow a tide. Jamal, bound, whispered an equation, his defiance a spark, his mom's arrival a miracle. The climax hit as Crane's mercenaries cornered them, guns drawn, their freedom a breath away from extinction. Alicia stood, her pistol steady, her resolve aflame against the dark, vowing to save Jamal, end Crane's reign. Jamal, zip-tied, met her gaze, his spirit unbroken, his fight for justice alive. But what final trap lurked in Crane's shadow? Alicia Carter's grip on her pistol was iron, her eyes locked on the mercenaries circling her and Jamal in the rusted Chicago warehouse, the air thick with the stench of oil and fear. At 16, Jamal was a coder, not the terrorist Victor Cranes. Lies had branded him, his black skin a target through Sergeant Roy Kessler's loitering charge, a rigged robbery, planted pills, staged riots, and a mercenary kidnapping dressed as a gang hit. His wrists, zip-tied, bled, his ribs cracked, but his gaze met Alicia's, a spark of defiance in his bruised face. She stood, her CIA training a blade, her heart a drumbeat for her son, cornered by Vance, the scarred mercenary leader, and his 5 gunmen, their rifles glinting in the warehouse's dim light. Vance's smirk was a taunt, his finger twitching on the trigger. "Crane paid for your head, kid," he said, his voice gravel. Alicia's mind raced, her covert ops flashing, her body coiled. She'd outsmarted killers before, hadn't she? But these were Crane's dogs, Kessler's shadow a tide pulling them under. She scanned the room. Rusted beams, a skylight, a stack of crates, her plan forming. "Drop the guns," she shouted, her voice a whip, "or I drop you." Vance laughed, but his men hesitated, her CIA aura a ghost they couldn't shake. Could she turn this standoff into salvation? Jamal, bound, his coder's mind whirring, spotted a loose bolt on the floor, inches from his foot. His equations, his logic screamed for action. He inched his sneaker, nudging the bolt toward a crate's base, a weak joint in its stack. If it fell, it could scatter the mercenaries, give his mom a shot. His heart pounded, his mom's pistol, steady, her love of fire. He whispered, "Now," and kicked, the bolt jamming the crate, its stack wobbling. Alicia saw, her instincts sinking, and fired at the skylight. Glass shattering, moonlight flooding, chaos erupting. The crates crashed, 2 gunmen diving, their rifles clattering. She lunged, tackling Vance, her pistol at his throat. "Call them off," Vance choked, waving his men back, their guns lowering. Jamal rolled free, his zip ties snapping on a jagged crate edge, his hands shaking but free. Was this their escape? Alicia cuffed Vance to a beam, her eyes on Jamal. "Run!" They sprinted. The warehouse's exit a rusted door. Mercenaries shouting, their boots pounding. Alicia kicked the door open, her SUV parked in the shadows, Zoe's hack guiding her here. They dove in, tires screeching as she floored it, bullets pinging the chassis, the warehouse shrinking in the rear view. Jamal's breath was ragged, his eyes wide. "You came, Mum." Alicia's hand gripped his, tears burning. "Always." Her burner buzzed, Zoe's voice crackling. Cranes exposed, files uploaded. Alicia's heart soared, her warehouse fight a spark that lit a fire. Had they finally won? Zoe's hack, paired with Alicia's leaked ledger and Jamal's. Smuggled note, hit the dark web, then global news. Crane's bribes, his prison empire, his mercenary hit, all laid bare. Protests swarmed Ironwood, Chicago PD, the DOJ, senators resigning, Crane arrested in his glass office, his shark's smile gone. Kessler, in his precinct, watched the news, his smirk fading, but his phone stayed silent, his network fraying. Alicia drove to a safe house, her CIA contacts, once silent, now active, pulling strings. Jamal's charges, from loitering to terrorism, were dropped, his record cleared. A federal apology issued. They hugged, Jamal's bruises a map of their, wore his coding dreams alive again. Alicia's treason charges vanished, her badge restored, her fight a legend. Was this justice, at last? Weeks later, Jamal stood at a Chicago rally, his voice strong, a microphone amplifying his words to thousands. "I was a kid waiting for my mom," he said, "but they saw my black skin and wrote me off. We fought. My mom fought. You fought. This isn't the end." The crowd roared, signs waving. Justice for Jamal a global cry. Alicia stood beside him, her blazer crisp, her eyes proud, her CIA scars hidden but burning. Reporters swarmed, Lena Brooks leading, her articles now Pulitzer. Talk. Jamal spoke of coding, of building apps for justice, his future a beacon. The rally ended, the crowd chanting. The sun setting over Lake Michigan, its waves a promise of peace. Had they turned the tide against systemic hate? Jamal and Alicia walked to their SUV, the crowd's cheers fading, their bond unbreakable. He clutched his taped photo, her smile in it his anchor through Ironwood's hell. She ruffled his hair. "You're stronger than me, kid," he laughed, the first in months, his coder's mind already sketching new dreams. They climbed into the vehicle. The city's lights a canvas of hope, their fight a spark for change. But as they pulled onto the street, a red laser dot danced on Jamal's chest, a sniper's mark from a rooftop shadow. Alicia's eyes widened, her CIA instincts screaming, her hand shoving Jamal down. A gunshot cracked, the SUV's window shattering, glass spraying. Jamal's breath stopped, his body curled, Alicia's scream a raw wound. She floored the gas, the SUV swerving, the laser vanishing, the shooter gone. Blood trickled. But whose? The screen cut to black. A news report breaking. Through a somber anchor's voice, tonight a rally for justice turned to chaos. Jamal Carter, the teen who exposed a prison empire, targeted in a suspected assassination attempt. Sources confirm the sniper was hired by Roy Kessler, the disgraced sergeant, still at large. The report showed Kessler's face, his smirk a ghost, a leaked email hinting at a larger conspiracy, names redacted, power deeper than Crane's. Jamal's fate hung, his survival unclear, the crowd's cries a mix of outrage and hope. Alicia's SUV sped into the night, her hands shaking, her son's weight in her arms, her fight unfinished. The climax hit as the sniper's shot flipped triumph into ambiguity. Kessler's shadow a promise of war. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're shaken by this betrayal, smash that like button to honor Jamal's courage, and subscribe to uncover the conspiracy's depths, because this story's not done. Who pulls Kessler's strings, and will Jamal rise to fight another day? Jamal Carter's harrowing journey through a racist system reveals the brutal reality of injustice faced by black youth in America. His story, sparked by a false loitering charge, exposes how systemic racism, woven into law enforcement, courts, and prisons, can transform an innocent moment into a life-altering nightmare. Jamal, a 16-year-old coder, endured fabricated charges, torture, and a near-fatal sniper attack, all because his blackness was weaponized by figures like Sergeant Roy Kessler and Victor Crane. Yet his resilience, paired with Alicia's relentless fight, shows that courage can challenge even the deepest corruption. The lesson is clear. Racist systems thrive on silence, but collective action, protests, exposés, voices amplified, can crack their foundations. Jamal's smuggled note, Alicia's leaked evidence, and public outrage forced accountability, toppling Crane's empire. However, the sniper's shot, Kessler's escape, and a looming conspiracy remind us that justice is fragile, demanding vigilance. Every false charge, every racist slur, every rigged trial is a call to stand up, to question authority, to fight for those silenced. Jamal's story isn't just his. It's a mirror for a nation, urging us to dismantle the structures that profit from prejudice. His coding dreams, unbroken by chains, inspire us to build a future where no kid fears a store's shadow. Let's honor Jamal by challenging racist systems daily. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you're inspired to fight injustice. Hit like to amplify this truth, and subscribe to Fuel Change, because your voice matters. Thank you for standing with Jamal and Alicia. May we all strive for a world where justice prevails.